The World Tree just mana fixes your 5-color deck, right? Not exactly. In this deck it's a win condition unto itself, but it's not the only one. Let me explain. Hey there, I'm Adam. I've been playing Magic the Gathering for over a decade. For a number of years I had a God tribal deck that was all 5 colors, and the entire strategy of this deck was to resolve the World Tree. Pay double WUBRG, tap and sacrifice, get all the gods from your deck onto the battlefield at once. With enough gods, and a couple of key gods in particular, this will win you the game on the spot. Most people don't see this coming because the World Tree is most commonly just played for its first ability to let your lands tap for mana of any color. But the play pattern of this deck was kind of the same every single time. Either I got the World Tree out, resolved it, and won the game sort of out of nowhere, or somebody removed it, and then the deck kind of just dirtled its way to an eventual, inevitable loss. This made the deck a bit gimmicky and stopped being fun to play with. So I wanted to build a new 5-color deck which still incorporated the strategy but wasn't totally reliant on it. It had other ways to win the game, such that I could choose the way I wanted to play the deck based on the hand that I was presented with and the board state that my opponents had. Giving the deck other win conditions not only makes it more resilient, but also just makes it more fun to play with and to play against. A couple of years ago, I'd also come into the position of a lot of Dominaria United product when a lot of it was on sale. There were a lot of 5-color support cards in that set, so I had a lot of the pieces already to build a different kind of 5-color deck. Where I ended up is a deck that aims to get double WUBRG available to it as consistently and as soon as possible in order to activate the effects of cards or cast spells that are alternate win conditions unto themselves, or just play big, fun, dumb 5-color spells that over time might be able to win you the game through sheer power. So how do we make sure that we've got 5 colors of mana accessible to us consistently? Well, that's why we're running Jenson Carthalion as the commander of this deck. His primary purpose here is just to filter our mana to make sure that we've got one of each color available. But we're also running as a companion Jegantha the Wellspring. Now Jegantha just taps for WUBRG itself. There is a restriction that mana cannot be spent on generic mana costs. This deck is built with Jegantha's mana restriction in mind, so you will either have a card that can use WUBRG as part of an activated ability, or cast a spell with WUBRG in its cost. Now running Jegantha as your companion does place a deck building restriction. You cannot have any cards in the deck that have more of one of the same mana symbol in their casting cost. In a way, it kind of just gives the deck a clearer direction, and it helps reduce the choice paralysis when you're actually building the deck. Truth be told, Jegantha is probably more relevant to the deck than Jenson is. You would want to be, most of the time, adding Jegantha to your hand on turn 3, or as soon as you have 3 mana available, and playing it as soon as you can with the intent to tap it for WUBRG the following turn. Plan A of this deck is still to win with the World Tree. To help enable us to actually get there, we are running a few land tutors. Crop Rotation is perhaps the most consistent of the bunch. Talaria West can be used to get the World Tree to hand, and Knight of the Reliquary is also a way. Presently I have 13 God cards in the deck, which is, after testing, I feel the right number. It's not a guaranteed win every single time when you resolve the World Tree's effect, but in practice, I'm yet to not win the game immediately as a result from resolving this effect still. Only playing 13 means that the deck isn't totally cluttered with gods and you are still able to move in different directions. In order to give yourself the best chance of winning when you activate the World Tree, you need to be running both versions of Purphoros. Purphoros God of the Forge will ensure that when all of your gods enter, each of them, except for Purphoros himself, will deal 2 damage to each of your opponents, and Purphoros Bronze-Blooded is going to give all of your creatures haste, which means that if they haven't died to the first Purphoros' effects, they will presumably die to all of your creatures attacking. To make sure that those creatures get through, Nylea God of the Hunt is going to give them all trample, Xenagos God of Revels is going to massively increase the power of one of those cards, and Morophon the Boundless can give your whole team a little +1/+1 bonus. The remaining gods in this deck are somewhat flavor to taste. Tiamat is in here because it's a card that has WUBRG in its cost, and there are enough dragons and or shapeshifters in this deck such that if you do hard cast this, you do actually get a reward of getting potentially 5 cards to hand. And just be conscious that some of the gods require your devotion to a given color or color combination to be above a certain amount, and take that into account when you're picking which gods you want to put into the deck, such that when you resolve the World Tree, you know that all of those gods are going to be online when they hit the battlefield. Failing that, this deck is also running Daughter Nothingness as a backup to the World Tree. It's a little bit more mana intensive, it only takes out one opponent rather than all of them at the same time, but it's still kind of doing the same thing, and there aren't really many other decks that you can actually run Daughter Nothingness in. It's just kind of a fun card to maybe get someone with on occasion. And then the final alternate win condition is Coalition Victory. Now to help enable Coalition Victory, we are running Leyline of the Guild Pact, and we're also running Prismatic Omen. These are just going to help increase the probability that you have all land types and all colors on creatures on your board. Then if all else fails, or if you just happen to want to play the deck in this particular direction, there are 20 cards in the deck with WUBRG in their casting cost. And some of these cards just feel really fun to play. I mean, cards like Two-Headed Hellkite, when you get it out and you're just smashing face and drawing a bunch of cards, feels kind of good. Maelstrom Archangel is going to help you cast even more of your spells from your hand and not worry about having to pay WUBRG again on that same turn. A lot of the cards in this deck happen to be legendary, so Jodah the Unifier is also a good card to include in the 99 here. And because we're running a commander and a companion that are both exactly 2 colors and they are different color pairs from each other, Niv Mizzet Guild Pack also kind of works in this deck. Supporting him, there happens to be a few more cards in the deck that are exactly 2 colors, and some of which are different color pairs to your commander and companion. While Jenson isn't key to the main strategy of this deck, he is very helpful if you want to go the route of just casting big fun WUBRG spells. But he can also turn into a ramp piece, in a way, if you happen to draw a card like Training Grounds or Biomancer's Familiar that reduces his ability to filter your mana to WUBRG to now tapping 3 generic mana to get WUBRG. Then in terms of lands, look, if you had an infinite budget, probably the best way to build this deck is to have all of the triomes. That will enable cards like Coalition Victory to come online and will help with any cards with Domain, and that would relieve the need to play cards like Prismatic Omen in the deck. So for example, you can run cards like Leyline Binding and Scion of Draco in this deck, knowing that you're probably going to be able to cast them for a very small amount of mana. In addition to that, I also think it's ideal to be running all 10 of the Pain lands. Jenson can filter your mana, remember, so what you really want is just something that can produce mana that's untapped that also has the option of producing colored mana should you need it. In the early game, you'll be paying the 1 life to use those Pain lands for colored mana, but once you get up to 5 lands and you've got Jenson on board, it doesn't matter, you just tap them for the colorless and filter them through Jenson to get WUBRG. The deck list on Archidekt might not reflect that ideal land base, simply because I like to keep my online decks consistent with what I have in paper, and what I have in paper is usually just based on what's in my binders. This deck is firmly in bracket 3 because it's running 2 game changers, and you could argue that the whole winning sort of out of nowhere with the alternate win conditions should put it in that bracket anyway, although in the case of the World Tree, it is kind of telegraphed. The difficulty is that it's often difficult to interact with lands once they're on the battlefield. This deck is by no means perfect, but I have found that it is a more enjoyable deck to play with than a traditional God tribal deck, simply because there's a few more avenues that it can go in. And who doesn't like just jamming a bunch of 5-color spells in a deck and just getting to sling them? How often do those cards sit in your binders or boxes and go unplayed because you're like, well, this 5-color spell, I don't really have a 5-color deck for it to go in, or my 5-color deck is focused on a specific strategy and this one is a bit too generic. Just jam them all in the deck together, guys. It's kind of fun.